Right, I was actually meant to do this yesterday, however, I was seconded into crazy German things. Anyway, PTS notes, or the developer notes, have been released. This is mostly a negative stance. It honestly is. However, it's not going to be negative towards the devs, just because I kind of feel like a lot of the things in here are too brain dead for a dev to put in. So I kind of feel like there's someone behind the scenes. Normally when things like this happen, it's the development team want to do ABC, but the publisher is like XYZ. And then we get problems. First one of this is I kind of feel like the devs would absolutely know that their game is not a tactical shooter. Like, we all know this is a looter shooter RPG with some MMO elements. It's not a tactical shooter. We know this. But yet, in the developer notes, it's referred to as a tactical shooter. Anyway, hopefully I've made this big enough for people to read along. Anyway, first one up is the weapons and talents, enhancing the accuracy and stability of some weapons. Our primary focus has been on the performance rather than the handability. I'm not sure if it's just military mind, but typically when you're talking about the performance of the weapon, you are talking about the handling. Although this does mean in real life, because it's not like bullets have a damage value. It's either mess them up, or kill them. Modifying accuracy and stability would result in diminishing the unique characteristics of each weapon, potentially leading to the homogenization, where all weapons become identical. Instead, our objective is to ensure that certain weapons are harder to handle, but in turn offer greater power when landing shots. Tell that to the USD-45. It's not exactly up, well, it's like the third highest DPS rifle, but it's pretty terrible, and all of its DPS comes from its fire rate. In terms of shot-for-shot damage, it is incredibly weak. So this notion goes out of the window immediately. We've decided to refrain from implementing any additional changes in that for now. However, we will reassess the situation following release and consider potential adjustments. I feel like this needs to be considered now, considering this is the idea of Project Resolve. Yes, weapons that hit harder should be harder to control. Weapons that don't hit as hard should be easier to control. Perfect example of this is going to be the difference between things like FAMAS, Elmos, Police M4, and then on the opposite side of that spectrum, TKB, AKM, Black Market AK. One, pretty easy to control, one side rather, pretty easy to control, lower damage, faster fire rate. The other, higher damage, harder to control, and lower fire rate. We have a spectrum. Just from naming those 6 weapons, we have a spectrum already. In some areas, such as rifles, this spectrum just doesn't exist. Up next is the exotic Mantis MMR. Is too buffed and needs a nerf. I actually do agree with this, although it is kind of sad, simply just because I kind of feel like where it is already, it doesn't really compete with things like Nemesis, and then when it comes to the high end, you might as well just use a White Death. I kind of feel like it needs something, but hopefully when they say the changes will be available, and obviously will be brought down. I'm hoping because it got plus 30%. Maybe they brought it down to like plus 10, plus 15, maybe, but they don't actually say. Dr. Home exotic rifle changes were unnecessary. Absolutely, just revert it, which is what they have done. They've just completely reverted it, which is brilliant. With all the other weapon changing, St. Elmo exotic AR rifle feels underwhelming. No, it doesn't. I have this conversation near enough at least twice a week. Elmo's isn't OP, doesn't need a nerf, it doesn't need changing. It is a very solid, well-balanced AR within that spectrum. If you want more burst DPS, there are ways in which you can use other ARs to get more burst DPS. If you want more sustained DPS, there are other ways in which you're able to get other ARs to do more sustained DPS. If you want a very solid middle ground, St. Elmo's does it all. That is literally it. This weapon doesn't need changing. It doesn't feel underwhelming within the new changes or the new spectrum. It is still going to be a top contender for a lot of builds, such as strikers, as obviously. I don't understand what people are on about here, and yeah, people are just a bit weird. All rifles should be giving a 30 to 50% buff to accuracy and stability. Buffing the handling of every rifle would risk diminishing the individual traits that make each weapon unique, potentially leading to a lack of diversity. There is already a lack of diversity. It's called the M1A. That's it. There is already a lack of diversity. The problem is, as to why a lot of people don't use other rifles, is exactly the thing you're refusing to do. This is stupid. Concerns about Nemesis, regular Scorpio exotics getting a bigger buff in PvP now that the third attribute can be reconfigured. I am not going to really comment on this in that spectrum. However, definitely Scorpio being able to put detox on as well as Regulus is going to be huge. However, that being said, every time I've seen someone use Nemesis within PvP, they one-shot everyone anyway. So I could be wrong, but I don't get this bit, just because from what I've seen, everyone just gets one-shot regardless of what build people are running. Nemesis will one-shot them. So I feel like buffing Nemesis or not, or nerfing Nemesis or whatever within PvP is kind of useless, because from, like I said, what I've seen, this just one-shots everyone anyway. Gear! Thank you for your suggestions. However, we currently do not have any plans to change the brand's sets. Our focus is enhancing the existing stats and not moving them around. This is a problem because, as you can then read, concerns regarding armor regen scaling in PvP. It's not just going to be PvP though. Once people figure out that they can get like 9% armor regen and still do a hefty amount of damage because of the damage changes, you're going to trivialize all of the content. There's going to be no aspirational content left. So yeah, I kind of feel like this is just like polite way of saying we don't know what we're doing. I feel like. Conflict, Unbreakable didn't need a nerf. I'm not going to touch on that. Either add more turrets or revert the change. Again, I don't know. I'm not a PvP player. However, they're going to be reverting Unbreakable back to its original form, and then the current implementation of the turrets did not achieve our goal of preventing spawn camping. Considering the technical constraints that prevent the addition of more turrets, we have decided to remove them from now and explore an alternative option. So it kind of sounds like whatever the problem was regarding this within PvP, yeah, it's staying for now. Dark Zone, the rogue activation timer could be shorter. The timer is set up to stop players going rogue near you to see how a shorter timer would function. We're adjusting it for 3 seconds within the PTS2. Descent, suggestion to add the reconstructed cache as a high price in the NSA shop. I actually quite agree with this. Maybe not the high price part, but then that also is going to depend on how high they put it. If it's like a reasonable high price, fine. But if it's like absolutely extortionate, which is what I kind of feel like they're going to do, then I would rather just not bloody have it. It's a great idea, and we are committed to implementing it. At the cost of caches will be very high though, so we're not sure. Even with the season's length change, it still takes too long to reach Nemesis. Our intention is to gauge the impact of the current changes in the live environment based on player feedback. We will make any necessary adjustment in the future title updates to ensure the best possible experience. Right now, we want to refrain from further shortening of the session length, as it can lead to frustration due to the waiting time between rooms and travel to time. I personally don't get this with the session length changes. It still takes too long to get to Nemesis. I'm not a huge Descent player, and I can get there in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I don't get it. I don't get that one, I'm sorry. Don't reduce the number of talents, but what they are actually implementing, just to paraphrase here, they're going to put like a UI somewhere which tells you the current rotation of the talents within Descent. And then there's debate as to how long that rotation should last. Apparently 1 week is too long, so they're going to see what they can do. I think 1 week is fine personally, but that's just me. Right, on to the big one. Gearlock. Gearlock has generated mixed opinions. No, it hasn't. I know literally 0 people that don't see at some point Some people are like, but here it could be. There's always a negative connotation, no matter what. So it's not a mixed opinion. As a collective, we hate it. Get rid. End. Should be. So we'd like to provide further insight to our motivations, which are poor. The Division 2 is a tactical shooter. No, it isn't. Meaning that strategic planning and decision making play a significant role in gameplay. One aspect of this strategy involves choosing and committing to specific gear items before engaging enemies, allowing players to swap gear during combat would diminish the tactical nature of the game. That is not what tactical is. As someone who is ex-infantry, okay, don't get me wrong, we go in wearing XYZ, but I've got a backpack full of stuff that you wouldn't bloody believe, just in case. Never used like 90% of it, but just in case. That is what tactical means. Adjusting to the situation at hand, and that situation changes very, very quickly. There's actually a pretty famous quote, which I'm going to probably butcher, but even the world's best laid out plans never survive first contact with the enemy. That is why we take extra shit. So 1, the game is not a tactical shooter. 2, that is not what tactical means. It also introduces complexity, as players would need to be aware of the mechanics of their current gear as well as all the other options in their inventory. This is a good thing. This promotes diversity of play. While some players may excel at managing this complexity, we believe it would make the gear system more difficult for the majority of players who don't understand and engage with. What you're telling me is you don't like skill gap. And also, won't someone think of the children? No, I won't think of the children. I don't care. That's literally how this reads. Won't someone think of the Go away. Seriously, go away. Additionally, balancing the game's difficulty becomes more challenging, as we would need to consider not only the available builds, but also the potential talent combinations that would be possible during combat. This is a you problem, not an us problem. Get a better team. Hire someone to figure it out. I know several players that have invited the developers to their testing servers where they can show them stuff that you wouldn't believe. And they would do it for free. And they're also actually pretty good at coding and whatnot, so they could probably show you the problem and then fix it for you. And they will do it for free. The developers refused. Don't ask why, I don't know. However, we acknowledge that in certain situations, preventing loadout swapping can be overly restrictive. As a result, we have decided to remove the loadout block for rogues. I don't understand why rogue agents, if you go rogue in the DZ, I'm assuming this means, is removed. Why do rogues get to hot swap? I don't get it. If anything, I would argue because they lose the SHD server, they should be the only ones that are actually in a combat lock, in terms of lore-wise. Gearlock while in combat, regardless of game mode, remains as it is, which is shit. Gearlock while in conflict remains as is. Gearlock while rogue will be reverted and available for testing in PTS Phase 2. Additionally, they've introduced quality of life changes, and to me this is just fluff just to try and distract us from the bigger problem. Even in combat lock, we can switch grenades. We can also switch gear while in shooting range, which is actually something that I really liked, because originally when testing in the PTS, every 2 seconds, in and out of the range, in and out of the range, in and out of the range. And when you join a new player, you will have a 1 minute grace period, which will allow you to change gear after joining someone's session. Yeah, the developer notes are just a collection of whether that would be the publisher or the developers, I don't know. But this literally just reads, we don't know what the issues are, we don't know how to fix it, and won't someone please think of the children. Have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.